Welcome to This Explainer. If you've ever felt like the university system is kind of stuck in the past, well, you're definitely not alone. Today, we're unpacking what I think is a pretty powerful blueprint for the future of higher ed. Specifically, we're digging into the Council on Higher Education's practice standard for transformative learning, teaching, and assessment. It's a fundamental rethinking of how knowledge is shared, how it's acquired, and ultimately how it actually prepares students for the real world. So, is the traditional university lecture dead? Well, we all know that dramatic shifts over the last few years, think the COVID-19 pandemic, the #FeesMustFall movement in South Africa, have deeply challenged the status quo. These events proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the old, rigid, one-size-fits-all model of teaching, it's just increasingly obsolete. Unanticipated challenges hit the academic project constantly, and universities absolutely must become way more adaptable if they want to survive and genuinely serve their students. Enter the Council on Higher Education, or the CHE. They've rolled out a formal framework that essentially acts as a reflexive, dynamic compass. This standard is specifically designed to modernize higher education and really drive student success. And to be clear, this isn't just a quick Band-Aid fix. This framework sets the stage for a massive 7-year implementation cycle, aiming for long-term structural enhancement across both public and private institutions. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the need for change. Look at the 5 transformative principles. Rethink teaching and assessment, touch on technology and AI integration, discuss resources and governance, and wrap up with a data-driven future. Let's get right into it. Starting off with Section 1, the need for change, disruption, and adaptation. In a dynamic context like South Africa, rising expectations for higher education, combined with complex socioeconomic realities, mean that the old-school one-size-fits-all approach of traditional lecturing just doesn't cut it anymore. Institutions simply cannot operate in a vacuum. Instead, this framework pushes for what it calls a pedagogy of care. What does that mean? It means moving toward flexible learning paths and student-centered mediation. Teaching actually has to recognize diversity, put the student front and center, and even value competencies that people acquire entirely outside of formal traditional curricula. Moving right along to Section 2. 5 transformative principles, the core framework. So to actually pull off this new pedagogy of care, the CEHE lays out 5 main pillars: contextual philosophy and identity, student access and success, co-creation, meaningful assessment, and technology and AI integration. Now, it's really vital to note here that these aren't meant to be rigid box-ticking checklists. Rather, they act as generative pillars. They're there to support higher ed institutions in critically reflecting on their own unique approaches and constantly improving their daily, on-the-ground practices. Let's zoom in on that first principle for a second. It states that learning must be responsive to the local, national, and international context of students and their communities. Now, why does that matter so much? Because, frankly, you just can't teach a rural student body the exact same way you teach one in a bustling metropolitan area. Education has to physically and culturally match its environment. It literally has to be deeply, authentically rooted in an institution's unique philosophical beliefs and values to actually work. That brings us to Section 3, rethinking teaching and assessment, the student journey. So the crucial point is, how does this actually reshape the day-to-day experience on campus? Well, it starts with co-creation. Teaching is no longer this solo act performed by a single academic standing at the front of a lecture hall. It's fully embodied in a team effort now. It's a shared responsibility rooted in learning-centeredness. It promotes inclusivity and actively collaborates with students, industry, the government, and the wider community to co-create knowledge that is actually relevant to the modern workforce. And naturally, this shift in teaching totally flips how we test knowledge. Assessment isn't just that terrifying high-stakes exam at the end of the year anymore. It now has a dual role. The framework explicitly frames assessment as an integral mechanism to actively promote learning, so an actual learning strategy to enhance a student's progress, while simultaneously serving as a method to establish what students have mastered. And of course, doing so in a way that is rigorously valid, reliable, and entirely credible. Section 4, technology and AI integration, bridging the divide. And this brilliantly illustrates just how forward-thinking this standard is. It explicitly calls for institutions to explore the responsible use of AI tools. The goal here isn't just adopting tech for the sake of it or chasing some shiny new trend. It's about actively using these tools to close digital divides, expand access, and embed culturally relevant pedagogies.
Institutions have to proactively invest in their infrastructure, all while navigating this carefully within legal bounds and considering the broader ethical impacts on society.
Moving to Section 5, Resources and Governance, Structuring the Change. Because let's be real, good intentions always need proper funding. Now let's shift our focus from the classroom to the boardroom. How does institutional leadership actually sustain these massive pedagogical shifts? Well, the framework offers a matrix of generative, open-ended questions for leadership. We're talking questions like, are our values actually visible in our teaching? Or are we allocating the right human and financial capital to make this happen? Again, the standard gives these flexible guidelines to prompt deep institutional reflection and spark innovation, rather than just handing down a rigid one-size-fits-all compliance checklist. It actually prompts a really powerful question. In which ways and to what extent does the institution contribute towards social, cognitive, and linguistic justice? This forces university leaders to take a hard look in the mirror and reflect on the ultimate purpose of their institutional design. Because at the end of the day, it's about building a sustainable and equitable society, not just churning out degrees.
Finally, Section 6, a data-driven future, tracking success.
Let's move to how this builds the foundation for everything else. To know if any of these transformative principles are actually working, institutions have to rely on solid evidence. I mean, you can't improve what you don't measure, right? To build a continuous improvement cycle, universities need to collect robust data on learning, teaching, and provisioning. Then they have to utilize it for key decision-making, and importantly, ensure its careful, ethical use in line with legislation. Doing this strengthens institutional capacity and guarantees equitable access, ensuring that we actively track who is succeeding and where the gaps still stubbornly remain. So, I want to leave you with a final provocation to really chew on. How will your institution's identity drive the future of student success? This standard isn't about blind conformity. It's a blueprint for genuine empowerment and change. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Next time you walk onto a campus, look closely at the educational environments around you. Are they truly transforming?